It is my pleasure to introduce a Thought Leadership Spotlight. The title is Building Culture for the Changing World of Work. Our speaker will be Mike Kaupe. He is the Global Director of Sales Engineering at HiBob. He'll be talking about how companies need to be flexible amid changes in the world of work and need to understand why the culture is so important, even though it's difficult to pin down. So for some in the business world, culture is just something fluffy you talk about rather than a reality. But Mike's company has done lots of research in this area over the last several years, holding conversations with literally thousands of workers, C-level executives, chief people officers, employees, line managers, an amazing survey, and he's got the information from it. It's an effort to understand where the labor market is headed, the evolving relationship between employers and employees, and more. So Mike's here to tell us what they're saying about building culture. Mike, take it away.
Amazing. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I know that 5:10 is a reception, so I'm here to tell you, hold on. We're almost there. But thank you for the introduction. So again, my name is Mike Kaupe, and I'm here today to talk to you about what Steve said, something very fluffy. And it can be fluffy, and that is culture. Now, when I think of culture, I actually think of music and food. My dad was in the military, and so I grew up on military bases here in the US and overseas, and I can remember that the food and music were something unique to each culture. Even here in Atlanta, I've actually been living here since 1998, and in 1998, the hip-hop scene was exploding, and there is a unique hip-hop culture today right here in Atlanta, and the food, varied and plentiful as well. From the ethnic restaurant scene we have on Buford Highway to the many, many southern eateries across the city. And I'm here to give you recommendations if you need it. Just come find me afterward. But when we think about company culture, it can be fluffy because there are many different takes, many different perspectives, attitudes, and situations that talk about culture. So how do we understand what culture is when there's not a true definition of culture? And so we also know that things are shifting. I'm old enough to remember when everyone went into the office. We all had similar hours. I used to check the traffic reports here in Atlanta just to make sure that I would get there on time or if I needed to take another route. Now you've got work from home, work from office, work from anywhere. You've got terms like flexible and hybrid and remote. These are standard terms today. So how do we know how to build culture when all this change is happening? And when you build culture, how do you know when you've achieved it? And how do you know you can maintain it? And then today, what if something happens that you need to repair culture? Like with what's happening right now with the mass layoffs that question a company's culture. So why is it so important? And what's really interesting to me is we've been talking about culture for a very, very long time. You know how I know? I Googled it. That's right. We've been talking about culture for a very, very long time. But why are we still talking about it? Why is it so important for the success of an organization to get their culture right? Let's take a look through different lenses. Tony Hsieh. I followed Tony and his rise at Zappos. Amazing. But what he affirmed during his rise at Zappos was that most organizations don't focus on company culture because the ROI is 2 to 3 years out. We can't do that in today's changing world of work. There's no way we can do it. And what's interesting is Tony made employee happiness a business priority. It was a business line item. Brian Chesky of Airbnb fame, he set out to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. And what he proposed is that strong company culture is the result of less corporate process and more trust. Think about that for a moment. More trust. How do you trust everyone in the organization to do what they say they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, for the benefit of the organization? Then here's Gary Vee of VaynerMedia. Gary actually talks about how culture is the backbone of the organization. He actually says that every company has a unique culture. Just like music and food is unique to specific cultures. Just like music and food can be unique here in Atlanta. He's saying that every company has a unique culture. And I actually know VaynerMedia a little bit better. I know his story and I know their story because they're a customer of HiBob. And what's interesting is they came to us because they wanted to change things. They wanted to make things better. One of the things they came to us for was onboarding. And what they wanted to do was they wanted the onboarding experience to be personal, unique, and they wanted it to touch culture from day one. And what's also interesting is that VaynerMedia is still like this today. They're always looking at their culture. What can they do to make things better? What we also learned was that culture is the accumulation of relationships that you cannot copy and you can't fake it. You ever heard that term, fake it until you make it? Not here. You can't do that. And we also learned that the example of culture must come from the top. It must emulate from the top leadership of the organization and then permeate through all people leaders in the organization so that everyone has that sense of connectedness, sense of belonging. I think Simon Sinek said it best. Simon says that employees must love the company first before the customers will love it. Essentially, what he's saying is that culture drives how we feel, and that in how we feel drives how we care for others. It's important. It's important these days that that happens. And the reason why is because employees are demanding better all the time. They're better at it. They're better at demanding than I was when I was younger, in the older generation. They're better at it these days. And they're expecting different patterns. They're expecting things to happen. So a little bit about HiBob. HiBob, just to get the name out of the way, HiBob is our company, Bob is our product. I like to think of it as Bob is to HR, like Siri is to Apple, Alexa is to Amazon, but Bob is our product. We were started in 2015, and we started on the idea that employee experience and the role of HR needed to change. It needed to evolve. So it's not a coincidence that our mission is to help transform how people in organizations operate in today's modern world. In this modern world of work, where things are constantly changing, evolving, demanding, how do we do that? Everything's about diversity and inclusion, dynamic things, digital collaboration, engagement, retention. So how do we do all of that and be successful at it? Well, we learned that we needed these three: trust, transparency, and teamwork. We had to do it. We were started in 2015. How do we build our own culture and be successful at it? How do we get everybody on board with a sense of purpose and the same mission? So we had to focus on these areas. And in fact, here are our HiBob values. Now, in true transparency, it took us a while to develop these. It actually took us a while to develop but it also took us a while to agree on it. We used surveys, leadership forums, interviews. We looked at what our customers were doing. We looked at what analysts were saying. But all of this, think about it. HiBob, my company, asked me what I valued. They cared enough to say, hey, Mike, what do you care about in our organization? What would you change? What would you do differently? What would you keep the same? Now, I don't have time to go through all 6 of these values, but I wanted to share my favorite one right now. And that is grow through what we go through. And the reason it's my favorite one right now is because when you take a look at what's going on in the global economy, the outlook is not great. And for HiBob, we're not immune to it. We are experiencing the same things that everyone else is experiencing. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot of fear. What's going to happen? We were growing, now we're not. But because I have this value at the center of my daily life, what I do each and every day, my team and I have a different perspective. We are learning through it. And we also have a different perspective and insight for our customers who are going through it as well. We actually have more empathy for what's going on. So this value is important to me. It's important to my team, and it's important to my company. So I'm going to share with you what we've learned. You have to be transparent. This is key. I mean transparency in everything we do, including the data, the visibility into the makeup of the organization. So for example, I have access, everyone in our company has access to understand the makeup of HiBob. This is why I know that I can go on my Bob app and I can see that as of today, 53% of our company are male, 44% are female, 31% are parents. But what that does is it holds everyone accountable. No matter where you sit in the organization or what your role is, you can ask the hard questions to leadership. You can hold people accountable for being transparent. But here's also what we've learned. Being transparent, it's hard. So we had to focus on context. Context was really, really important. Context made everything relevant. It gave us more of that shared purpose and mission because it also helped us to learn how to articulate the information better. Here's an example. Context. How do you develop context when perceptions are different? Maybe when your perception is different. How do you do that? Very, very hard. Here's evidence that employers underestimate the value of vision in the company versus employees. Context was so key for us to make sure we get everything right. And so when we're looking at transparency, we're also looking at context. We also needed to be clear in how we were saying things. We didn't want to misrepresent what we were doing. And if you're not clear, things can be misunderstood. There could be information overload. So clarity was key. So being transparent, having the right context, and being clear was key to how we were building our culture of trust. And I mean trust in making sure that trust was earned, it was shared and accepted. But it started from being transparent from the very, very beginning. And trust is hard, especially in our diverse world, cross borders, global teams, cross collaboration. How do you trust everyone's going to do what they say they're going to do? Well, we had to foster inclusivity. And guess what? Being inclusive actually started with transparency. But the one thing we learned more about how we needed to be inclusive was that we learned that it was less challenging when we looked for the policies and procedures that created experiences of exclusion, and then we simply removed it or changed it. It was that vision into the exclusion that we found out how we can be more inclusive. We also found out that when we foster inclusivity, it fostered collaboration. This was actually a lot of fun. The collaboration between cross teams, bonds and relationships begin to form. Fun alliances happen when you introduce competition. Things were happening that were just becoming natural. It felt like we didn't have to do anything, and still to this day, it feels like when we focus on this collaboration, things just automatically happen. And I'm not saying everything's perfect. There are disagreements. There are things that people believe differently and perceive things differently. But this is still helping us build the culture of trust that we want. We also found out that there's a cost to perception. If we perceive things differently or wrong, there's a cost to it. So here we have managers that believe, or leaders that believe you can be more productive at the office. How many of you heard that? Exactly, right? But employees believe they can be more productive at home. So what we found out was the cost here was really the lack of trust. So how do we continue to go back to, do we trust our employees to do what they say they are going to do? And what that drove was better engagement, job satisfaction, and what we're seeing is reduced turnover, right? And increased productivity. We also learned to praise the group. Or I'll say it this way. We learned that we needed to praise the groups instead of just individual achievements. This helped with team cohesion. It helped with camaraderie. It helped with feedback. It helped the group started giving each other feedback, good feedback on how well you're doing, and if you truly messed up and how you can get better. So everyone had that sense of mission to get better. And what was interesting is that everyone had the courage to give it and started having the humility to receive it. It's hard to receive something when it's not great. I know, I've had that in my career. But ultimately, what this did is recognition just helped in general, right? It helped with building that collaboration. It helped with being open to the feedback that was really needed across the teams, building relationships, inspiring things to happen. This is what's going on in HiBob today. This is what we talk about with our customers on a daily basis. We talk about culture a lot, partly because what our products can do, but the other part is what we are doing as a new company. So I'm going to leave you with this today. And I think this is the most important thing that I would like to share. And if you leave here with one thing I say today is this. Building strong company culture starts by understanding what your employees value. If company culture is unique, for every company, understanding what your employees value is key. And there's going to be things that happen. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. The global economy is slowing down. Our organic growth is slowing. Potential customers are holding off on decisions. Interest rates and exchange rates are causing financial tightening. The list goes on and on and on. But if you focus on what your employees value, that's going to matter. And remember this, building strong, healthy, and good company culture can be difficult, but it's not impossible. Thank you.